Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's do this. So, this is a look back on what I did on crowdfunding of May 2022. We're going to do something slightly different today. We're not going to sort by all the ones I backed and that I didn't back. We're just going to give you a rundown of the notable ones from the past month that mostly ended in May. So that's the criteria. So if it's still ongoing, if it's ended in the beginning of June, if it started in April, and sort of, you know what I'm saying. So let's go into it. Let's dive into all of those. My opinions on post crowdfunding campaign. Did I back it? What would have made me back it? Why didn't I back it? Everything in between. And then this is also going to give me a jumping off point for a year from now when I look at this video and I say, where are things now? Because the hype video from a year ago, this is a great comparison point to use going forward. Enough ramble. Smash the like and we're ready to go. Let's do this. Now, we have to start out with the first one here being Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, just because it was probably the most hyped and the most really funded of games ending in May. And why are we talking about this? Well, it killed it. It did over $2 million. Red Raven Games' best game, the sequel to it, the next chapter, the 2.0 version of it, it did $2 million. That's pretty awesome, right? Well, I don't know. When you put it in the perspective of the lesser hyped $1.1 million, and then it got basically the critical acclaim of all of the biggest channels, all of the biggest ones out there. Not me, I'm too small to have an opinion on something like this, but basically all of the channels here that you would ever be able to name off the top of your head if you're in the board game hobby, saying that this is one of the best games that they've played, one of the best games of the year, period, da 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 da. And I have to wonder if there's a little bit of Gamefound effect. And I wonder because if you go back down here to the original game pledge, you can get the original game as an add-on. You can get it down here as just an individual right there. And so I have to wonder how many people, how much of that money is split between both of those. So then $2 million isn't as much as I would have expected, comparably. But this is a lifestyle game. This is a campaign game. And so people are being choosier about the campaign games right now. And I think that has to be the main take-home point from this, is that we are seeing a tapering off of the campaign games in terms of the upper threshold, the upper ceiling of funding. Because people are starting to say, I have too many of these games. I'm going to pick and choose. Now, which one is right for you and how does this differ? And, the base of this game being so solid that people know what they're getting and they can expect a great game. But if it's not for you, it's not for you. And I think that's what we're starting to see people be slightly more discerning of. I won't say totally discerning because it's crowdfunding, right? So did I back it? Because I was seriously interested in it. Just like the first time around, they offered an extra expansion. The miniatures did nothing for me whatsoever. But you know what? I just couldn't resist. I just could not resist it. I ended up getting just the Distant Skies pledge. I didn't get the audio narration. I didn't get the Primeval Peril. I didn't want that stuff. So $85 with an expansion included? I'd say that's a great deal. Shipping included, the base game is going to be, unless it's on another crowdfunding campaign in the future, it's going to be more than this $80 right here. Retail was like $80 or $85, at least, before shipping. So you include an expansion in there, it's a great deal. I give Red Raven a lot of credit. They sucked me in. I couldn't resist it. It's probably going to sit on my shelf for years and collect dust, but that's why it was the #1 game of the month. That's why it was the #1 funder. And that's why we have to talk about it, because it's setting the standard for this type of game going forward. Say what you will about it. So next up, we are going to go all the way to the end of the month. We are going to go to Wayfarers of the South Tigris. This one killed it too. 608,000 New Zealand dollars, which I forget how much that is in US dollars, 400 something. Either way though, Garfield Games has a very solid backing. They have a very solid core of the games they produce, the people that love these games, and the people that are willing to support them on a crowdfunding style. And I can say nothing bad about this campaign. They're very frank. They're very forward, saying, hey, if you want to pick up our game later, that's cool. We're cool by that. Do you. And there aren't many companies that really go out there and say that. They throw in the, well, it might not be available widely at distribution, or these might be in limited availability in some capacity, and they don't do that. And you have to love that. Now, for a different dice-style worker placement game, the question was just going to be, how different was it than the other worker placement Euro-style games that they put out with the previous trilogies that they've done? And I would say, as a person who gave it a real hard look and really wants this game in their collection, I'd say it's solid. I'd say it looks great, and I'm eventually going to try and pick up a copy on the secondary market or even at retail, plus or minus promo pack, because this is the take-home from this one. Promo packs are completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. Promo packs you're hardly ever going to use, especially thrown in a deck of cards that's already this thick. You're never going to get to them. You may see one of them every other game. Completionist in me is cringing a little bit, but the realist in me is saying that makes the most sense. I think this is going to be a tremendous game. I think people are going to be very happy with this. I think you're going to be looking at another Board Game Geek Top 200 style game by the time all is said and done. But I just didn't see a reason to back it on crowdfunding, and that's okay for me, because everybody can do their own on what they want with this. But it definitely is intriguing to me because I am not a Euro-style mainly game, especially with dice. And so with this is really bridging that gap to people like me who are interested in getting into it, but a little shy, a little afraid, a little overwhelmed. And so giving us a good entry point, and I give them a lot of kudos for doing that. And we'll see where it goes from here. Next up, we have Castles by the Sea from Brotherwise Games. Basically, what I was thinking originally, maybe more to my tastes, Santorini would be, essentially, right? More what I thought Catacomb Cubes from Elzra Games was going to be in the three-dimensional building of these castles to suit your own needs, with putting wooden meeples on top, with wooden blocks. I mean, incredible, right? Fantastic. 1 to 4 players, light, 30 to 45 minutes, great foundational game, great play with anybody, game group, families, everything in between. A few unlocks, a few upgrades. Yeah, you know the answer to this one. I backed this one. I kept it. I couldn't not do it. It is the perfect sweet spot. You get an expansion at the upper pledge level. You can deluxify it, bling it out here with some screen printed meeples if you really want. I've got a message out to them asking, hey, I've got this $55 pledge, and there's no way to upgrade into the pledge manager for $65. It's either add on a $65 or just keep my $55, which is kind of strange. So I don't know what's going to happen with that pledge yet. And if I miss out on the pictured meeples here, it's not the worst thing in the world, because I've got the ones for Meeples and Monsters, the Kickstarter edition right now too, and I'm not terribly impressed. They sort of get in the way almost more than they're super nice. Now these wooden hazard pucks, that's a whole different story. I would be interested in those. I thought there was something else wooden down here you could do as an add-on. There's a little bit of exclusivity here. A little bit. And that was the other reason I kind of FOMO'd out. Not FOMO'd because I didn't really fear of missing out. But like I said, it's more of a promo akin with the Wayfarers, the Tigris. So, yeah. It just hits on all cylinders of the sweet spot. Don't have anything like it. And what I wanted a few other games to be in my collection. So, I'll take it. There you go. Next up, Iconoclash. I was super hyped about this game at the beginning of the year. This was one of the ones I was really top 10 looking out for and interested in. It only got $27,000. And Strange Machine Games, it sort of flew under the radar and didn't hit very many stretch goals, but it was the adaptation of Super Smash Bros., essentially. And I don't know sort of why it wasn't as big of hit with people as I initially expected, because I guess maybe I'm showing my own personal bias here of my nostalgia for that. Spoilers at the beginning of this one. I went in for $1, but I don't think I'm going to be upgrading. I ended up watching some video of Rolling Solo as they played it. Not solo, they played 1 versus 1. And I couldn't help but feel it was like a three-dimensional Exceed, only without the dynamic of Exceed that I really loved. Just a little bit more smash and bash. And not that I have anything wrong with that. I love that. I mean, Novel 99 Games, great games, love them, love their work, but I couldn't see myself enjoying it in the same sense at a 3 or 4 player count. And that's really what I was looking for, was more of that dynamic with 3 or 4 players. And it felt very arbitrary, sort of even more so like a three-dimensional King of Tokyo, if you will, with not dice, but cards instead. And as much as I thought this was a great deal, getting all these characters with the expansions, I mean, even the Upper level pledges, I think this one right here, let's see where it was, $80 for everything, essentially, for the gameplay all in. I thought that was a good price. I just couldn't pull the trigger. I just couldn't do it. It looked too much for what it was. It looked like it was almost complicating things, less Super Smash Brothers than I was hoping, even though I guess I don't really know what I was hoping for in the Super Smash Brothers port, and for some reason, it just didn't fully ever click with me. I went down to the wire at the last minute. I changed to a $1 pledge, and only since the pledge manager has gone up, I believe now at this time, have I decided not to probably upgrade. Will I regret it? I may. I may regret it once it comes out to retail, but right now I'm okay with it, and so we'll just kind of see where we are, say, in a year, I guess, from that standpoint, right? Next up, we have Damask. We're going over to Gamefound. This was another one that I sort of thought flew under the radar, and I'm really surprised that this only raised £12,000. Now, obviously, it's not everybody's ilk with more of a 1 to 4 player abstract style of game, but this is a game where I see getting a lot of attention in a year or two on the side of like Spiel weighted nominee games in that aspect of just something that really appeals, something that is easy to play, has enough nuance, a la the Azules and those types of games of the world. I wonder now if this could have done 2 or 3 times the amount if it was over on Kickstarter and had more exposure. Because like a lot of these Gamefound projects, they sort of get lost in the nebulous of Gamefound, where it's not as easily accessible or searchable or findable when you're looking at projects that are live or even upcoming right now, and the interface really needs to be upgraded. I really like this. The cleverness of the play, the pattern building, the manufacturing process that they're taking and using here in terms of the stock and manipulation. I just think it's a very clever game, and I can't wait to get my hands on it at retail. I probably should have backed this one. I don't know how widely available it's going to be, but I just couldn't pull the trigger for what it was. It's probably a $50 game that I think is probably worth it from an indie side, but I'm having to pick and choose lately nowadays, and I just decided to wait and see on this one, even though I think this is probably one of the best games on this whole video. I will put that out there. I would say, mechanically speaking, this could be the second or third best game behind Sleeping Gods and maybe Wayfarers of the South Tigris. I don't say that lightly either. I risked it. I risked not getting a copy, and I may regret that, and this may be one of the few that eventually joins another video in the future of games I regret not backing. This would probably be on the short list right now for high contenders in that regard. Speaking of other Gamefound projects, the Great Wall reprint. Almost $1 million. Similarly, I would argue that a little bit like Sleeping Gods, this one underperformed, but I think this was slightly different. This was because, and this is always a controversial subject, we see polls come out, we see, small sampling sizes here and there. How do people compare, interest-wise, miniatures versus non-miniatures? And what I mean by that is miniature pledge levels versus standees versus meeples. Because we have seen the rise slowly of standees, but it is still not widely accepted. Projects and campaigns like this are still heavily focusing on the plastic more than anything else, because it's where the cash is still consistently. And this is no exception. But I have to wonder, with how much this did over here on the original Kickstarter of £1.1 million, as opposed to what it did this time around with 789,000 euros. I mean, that's not a terrible amount less, right? But this was also quite heralded in terms of the way that Awakened Realms manipulated their spin on the worker placement element, solo, co-op, and competitive. And it got some high praise from big channels, Dice Tower included, Board Game Ramblings. A lot of people really liking this game. And they did 2 sort of weird things that sort of confused me. They didn't offer any new content. It was just a pure straight up reprint, essentially. And they didn't offer that Meeple pledge. Now you can go over here and you can look at these pledges and you can see, okay, there were only 2,000 people of this 15,000 getting the Meeple pledge there, and another 1,000 there. So 3,000 of the 15,000. That's what, 20%? That's not high. It's not low either. So how do you feel about that? Would it have gotten more? Would it have been worth it production-wise? Are we going to see the Meeple version show up at retail and make it more affordable at the retail level cost? I don't know. They haven't really revealed any details. I believe, now as always, the core is going to be your best. They're reprinting some of the expansions, I believe, were more of the enticement, the Ancient Beasts and the Black Powder expansion. And, you know, don't take me on this. Maybe the playmat or the upgraded resources. Maybe some of this is new. I can't fully speak. I'm not as adept at this game or this campaign as I probably should be. But that being said, I was never really interested in it either. It's one of those that, you know what, I'm dipping my toes into this, but this is not a worker placement game that I'm going to be going into anytime soon either. I mean, you're talking probably a 2 to 4 hour game at least, and that doesn't mechanically fit with me, and that doesn't, you know, gameplay length-wise doesn't fit. It was really never a threat for me to back it in that sense. Do people love it? Yeah, you've got 4 of the biggest channels right here talking about how much they love it. So, not for lack of hype, not for lack of availability, because it was not available at retail whatsoever. So I just wonder, was there something missed out on not having something new? Was there something missed out on not having the Meeple version? I mean, I understand why they didn't. From a business aspect, it probably is not worth the headache in terms of the packaging, the production costs, and everything else in between. But it also makes the price point that much higher. And you're also going to price people out that don't want to pay that much, who are just not going to ever get the game then. Food for thought. The lesson take home from that one is just that. There you go. Now, this next one was a very interesting case study. Cryptozoic has not really done much crowdfunding, but I give them a lot of kudos because when I heard that this was coming to crowdfunding, I sort of poo-pooed it. I sort of brushed it off as, you know what, this is going to be a bleh, right? DC deck builder, it's kind of been around for a while. Its mechanics have not been as refreshed as several of the more newer, innovative deck builders over the last couple years have shown us what they can do. And then they were combining it with this one-on-one and a new expansion all in one campaign. And I wasn't terribly impressed. And then they raised $1 million. Because they really learned how to manipulate the market on a FOMO aspect. They really threw in big box, exclusive this, exclusive that, and this is not an insignificant amount of promos here. The problem I had with it as well as someone who didn't really have an interest in the game, but it was a passing curiosity, was that they sort of divvied it up. Like, if you wanted all of them, you had to get the all-in pledge. It wasn't like you could get some of them, pick and choose, or the ones that you really wanted or not. It was basically, you could end up with ones that you really couldn't use potentially that well, but you may need to get all of the other stuff you don't want just to get the ones you do want, if that makes sense. It made sense in my mind before I said it. Rivals here, again, there's plenty of stuff there. And then they also consolidated some of their other base games here where you could get without boxes essentially for an actually really good price. And I think that was the other thing that I was really surprised by, was I went on the Board Game Oracle during the time that this was funding and I compared some of the prices of these games, of what was available versus what they were offering it for. And they were offering some very, very, very competitive prices. I would dare say several of them were actually significantly better, even if you included the shipping, which I wasn't expecting from Cryptozoic, which is impressive. I don't necessarily like all of the exclusivity, but it definitely gave people a reason to back it instead of trying to do the old, I'm going to pick it up at retail, especially as with these deck building games, people tend to be a little bit more completionist in general, overall, or willing to pay to be a completionist. So it definitely was an aspect of that, I feel like, in the funding. Again, it was never a threat for me to be able to get it. I have no other DC deck building, but I was hoping maybe it offers something new, innovative. It'd be a standalone, something, you know, a great entry point as a new entry point to the series with something new, mechanically fresh, completely different. And it wasn't, but that's okay because people still liked what they saw. Otherwise, it wouldn't have raised $1 million. So there you go. Uprising, Titans of the First Age, the Uprising Curse of the Last Emperor expansion, almost $700,000 on Gamefound, which was relatively good compared to the first time around because this was not at retail. This is a very small company. I put my video out there. My picture's about to pop up here in a second. There's my quote, never mind. But I ended up pledging for this one, and then they said afterwards, we'll get you a review copy. So maybe I'm gonna have maybe I'm gonna have two copies and I'll give one away, or I don't know, or maybe I'll just have one that I paid for. I have no idea, but it's coming. It's doing more of a good thing with this game, and this is the main thing I'll say about this: is they took the criticisms from myself, but many other people. They listened to them. They addressed them in an expansion that did not add significant amount of complexity or significant amount of game length, which is the fear with something like that, and they made it better. How many times can you say that about a game where an expansion was addressing some of the faults? Now, you can make the argument that, oh, well, we should have addressed it in the real, and in the first. No, you can't do that always. But now that they did it, I would argue that this expansion is probably more interesting and better to have than the expansion with the arch nemesis is, the one that's sitting right here to my right. I think this one is more important than this one. And that's not saying anything bad about this one. So you just need to know, because at this point, the base game with the expansion right now in the secondary market is being sold for the all-in ultimate pledge level on, secondary websites, Facebook, Reddit, Board Game Geek. So this was a relatively great deal in that sense. And if you wanted to bling it out, they gave you options to bling it out as well. You didn't need to, but you could, which was great. And it's standees, folks. Acrylic standees. Boom, mic drop. There you go. So yeah, I'm in on this one right now, as I said earlier. More dice wouldn't be bad. That's okay though. I don't need it. Asymmetric, cooperative, 4X style game. There really is nothing else out there like it. I give them a lot of kudos. They went off the deep end, trying something that had really never been done before to see if it would work, and it's been met with relative success. The biggest downside at this point is it's long. It's too long. That's the biggest criticism. If there was one thing that I would have liked to see over some of the other stuff, is a way to streamline it, a way to start a little bit further into the game so that it's less of an overhead time-wise. Think of it sort of like, if you're familiar with Kingdom Death Monster at all, the first hero, to jump over some of the prologue to get you some resources, to get you some stuff, to get you going so you don't have to do the rinse and repeat of the first couple times around. Otherwise, it was a great campaign, and they're going to kill it. It's one of the smallest companies actually on this list probably, so don't be fooled by how much it raised. Next up, Renegade Studios. This was a really confusing one to me, because for a while they said that this was going to go to retail. And then all of a sudden they switched to crowdfunding, it seemed like. The really strange thing was, for a miniature-driven game, the big driving factor for a lot of these miniature games is that they are exclusive. There is some degree of exclusivity and some more get it now. And it was really just this retro Snake Eyes promo. Now, they put another vehicle pack promo, I think, in there, but for the extent that you were getting, the exclusivity was really these two promos. Which, as I said earlier, promos are becoming less and less enticing, because the game itself, which is based off of the Power Rangers miniature game in terms of the system that we were using, stuff that was being included was not as robust as I was expecting in terms of the variability and in terms of the good guys, bad guys rotation. It wasn't bad, but I was looking at it as, this is priced like a game that has a lot more going on, something like this, and I just didn't see how it could hold up. $100 essentially for 5 heroes and 2 bosses, sort of. I mean, there's all the other stuff too, but I can't help but feel that if this was a non-miniature game, you'd be looking at a $35 game, $40 game. And instead it's $100. That is a big price point discrepancy for me personally. I am a big fan of G.I. Joe. Like, I've been saying knowing is half the battle for years without people getting that reference in public spaces and at work and things like that. Like, I grew up watching this show. So this was a nostalgia hitting home that I really wanted to back. And this art is fantastic. Cobra Commander, Destro, Cobra. I just love it. Snake Eyes is one of the coolest heroes in any show, film, anything like that. He is just awesome. But I looked at this and I said, I just can't do it for what they're asking for and what I'm getting. Am I going to be heavily invested looking at this at retail? Yeah. But I also think a lot of the Kickstarter stuff from Power Rangers hasn't always been at retail easily either, or it's stayed at this price. I can't necessarily see myself picking it up for this price. I would love to see a non-miniature version of this. I would pick this up in a heartbeat if there was a non-miniature version of this for half the price. A heartbeat. It would end up in my collection. I've almost picked up the G.I. Joe deck building game from Renegade for the same reasons. And for an IP that is this well known, I can't help but think that this is massively underperforming with $176,000. Take it for what you will. I want this game to succeed. I hope it does because I want to see more content for it. But unless it picks up something non-miniature in the future, I'm going to have a hard time getting it in my collection for that price. So as much as I love cooperative games like this, I just can't afford to do it at this time. What do we got up next? Almost done here. Only got a couple more. Assault on Doomrock, the Ultimate Edition. Transparency here. Going backwards here for a second on this page. I do not like the artwork on the front of this. I saw this game years ago, and I was turned off by that. Only my recent open-mindedness of not judging a book completely by its cover in the board game scene over the last year and a half or so, did I become aware of this prior to it launching several months ago. Only 200,000 euros, which is highly under what I would have expected. But this is an Ultimate Edition that is a hard, also luck-driven-esque crawl game based on several scenarios that you're linking together. And that's not going to be everyone's taste or everyone's forte, even though it plays solo in 60 minutes. But those last elements, 60 minutes cooperative, was why I gave this one a very hard look. This one was another that I went down absolutely to the wire of. These guys are all saying this is a fun game. This is a fun, difficult but not overwhelming, smart, make you feel good about it when you can succeed, cooperative game. Card driven. Some exclusive stuff. Super tempted. Because this isn't a bad price. This is a relatively good price. I don't need the custom dice or the coins. This is the gameplay all in, which is only 116 euros. And it gets you modular expansions, roguelike expansions, promos, stretch goals. Don't need the metal coins or the custom dice. But there you go. And it's a better value than buying them all individually down here. Again, I hate that, but it is. I'm probably going to put this on the short list with Damask, if that tells you where I decided to go. That I didn't choose to back this one. But I'd also be lying that if this is not on my short list of things to pick up on the secondary market, I don't know what is. Because of the nature. I watched gameplay, I read the rule book. I think this game has a chance to fit in very nicely because of the Cthulhu Death May Die-esque scenario-driven mechanisms. Because there's just something to be said about being able to play through something replayable that is going to be different every time, that has low overhead but high complexity in terms of, you know, what you can do and how you want to do it. And the more I look at this, the more I make myself actually want to look into basically a late pledge. And I know I shouldn't, and that's the problem with doing this video like this, but I'm really tempted now. I'm really tempted. Probably more tempted than Wayfarers, more tempted than Damask, even though Damask is cheaper and it gets the advantage there. This is tempting. I need to stop looking at this page. So either way, like I said, I passed, but could I see myself late pledging for this at some point? Absolutely. Could I see myself having this in my collection? Absolutely. We'll see where it goes. So, getting close to the end here. 2 more games. We have Thunderstone Quest, the Deepwood Defenders. What was this, like 13 and 14? Was it? No, 12 and 13. I love deck building games. I really enjoy Thunderstone Quest. I can't get it played hardly at all. And I have basically 1 through 9 or something like that. 1 through 8. 1 through 10, something along those lines. And they're offering everything a la carte in this campaign. They were offering literally a different starter quest as well that you could get just with a nice little setup that isn't the huge, massive freaking box that I got in the first campaign, or the second campaign, actually. That is taking up almost a whole Calyx cube itself. $55 for 2 quest level expansions. I haven't played it enough to know if $55, or essentially, let's say $35 almost, 30-ish dollars, just over $30 including shipping, per expansion is worth it. With the amount of content that I have, with the amount of, mixing and matching you can do in the first place, and how unique are these new things? How worthwhile are these new things that they're giving? I don't know. I love the idea of this. But unlike Aeon's End, which I know I can get to the table, which I know I can teach to anyone, this has more to it, lengthwise and rule-wise. And so it's not as easy to get to the table. And so I just don't think I need as much content. I already have too much content, already taking up like a calyx and a half. I ended up passing on this one. I could see myself, if this ever gets in a regular rotation, I could see this being picked up later without any doubt. But I also can't get through most of the stuff I have in either of those games already. So from the non-completionist side of things, I have way more than I'm ever going to use anytime in the next couple of years anyway. Great game. How new is it? This is like the legendary expansions. How much can you do differently without losing the essence of what it was, or without overcomplicating it in the first place? And I'm just still not quite sure. The jury is still out on this one because we haven't gotten through the rest of them. But people love it. People are willing to go for it. That's why it raised $200,000, and it's going to continue to put stuff out for it as long as people are going for it. It's a great product. I love a lot of AEG's stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes in the future, but I just couldn't do it at this time for something that has yet to get any significant rotation in my collection whatsoever. Last up, we have Oranienburger Kanal. I haven't been a fan of Spielworks' other games. They're too heavy for me. Full disclaimer there. Rosenberg's other games, again, too heavy for me. This one did really well, though. 81,000 euros, 1,600 people. This is a conceptually great game in terms of putting these canals down, building these buildings, matching back and forth, using sort of a rondel-esque system that they've got going on here in terms of resource management. I gave this one a hard look-see. But what I was a little worried about was these expansions that are going to go along with it, and I think shipping was like another good $25 or almost $30 to the US. So I just couldn't justify it. And I also couldn't quite figure out, do I really need expansions? Are these expansions that I really need? Expansions for €5 each, essentially? And those were some of the doubts, as I doubted the last two Spielworks games, Squaring Circleville and one of the other ones, I think. And sorry, not a rondel, a resource wheel mechanism. I always mess up Rondel's definition in these videos. Variety, replayability, expandable card decks. How much, though? Do you really need it? Otherwise, I think it's relatively straightforward once you read the rulebook. The diagramming here is not the best that I've seen on the page, and I don't think it does it necessarily the justice of how strategic this game may ultimately be. But this was surprisingly a closer call than I was expecting. But the fact that it was going to run me almost $80 for this card-ish abstract game in the end is sort of like Amygdala right now from Game Brewer over on Gamefound. For the price versus the competition, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And this one, yeah, it doesn't have a distribution network. So if you don't get it on here, you may just not get it. So there is some FOMO, literal FOMO. Not artificial because it's exclusive. This was a very interesting month overall because of these games. More games that I was canceling, but almost having some regrets on at the same time than I was expecting. And this is why I like crowdfunding, because these are the things that I would never expected to like in the first place until I saw the concept, saw the rules, and got an idea of what it looked like. There you go. That's it. All the games that I gave thought to this month, what I backed, what I didn't back, why I didn't back it, and how I feel now. All in one nutshell. So that's it. That is the May 2022 roundup. And it's a great jumping off point for, like I said, next year's video when I look back at these games and I say, where are they? How do I feel about them? And should I have picked them up? Are they still in my collection? Or how do I feel about them either way? So there you go. That's it. What are your thoughts? What did you back? What didn't you back? What did I miss? What should I have backed? What did I miss out on? What did I, do good on not backing? I don't know. Anything else in between. That's it. That's the video. Stay classy. Have a great day. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and where your head's at and how expensive your June is going to be. Interesting titles. We'll see where it goes. Stay classy. See you around.